Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Aquarius and your moon in Cancer. So I checked my channel, didn't have that one, had sun in Cancer, moon in Aquarius. I thought I had both combinations. I'm curious how many people have this combination because this is totally weird. And the sun and moon, sometimes they're not on the same page, to say the least. Well, this is one of them. The sun is the masculine part of you. What is the masculine part of you? The part that is goal-oriented, the part that is going after your dreams, whether it's, when I said goal-oriented, I think I was speaking about professional goals, but it can be anything that you want to accomplish, to manifest, what have you. The moon, and it's also your talents, showing off your talents to the world. The person who's like the performer is going out there in front of other people, usually, and performing. The moon is more interior. It's the feminine principle. And it has to do with our emotions, how we express emotions, how we view the emotional nature. Do we embrace it wholeheartedly, maybe milk it for all it's worth? Do we kind of run for the hills? What exactly are we doing and why are we doing it? And, our trigger points, those are those sensitive areas that are informed by past experience. You're not going to have a sensitivity about something you've never experienced. It's usually something like a trigger. You don't get triggered if out of the, random things. You get triggered because it's something that reminds you of something that happened to you that might have been similar. And so I've said this before, I totally am against the trigger warnings that sometimes people put in front of videos or what have you. I think that triggers are sources of information for you to know where you need healing. I don't think that we should hide from the things that trigger us. I do believe in like having warnings about graphic material, because that's just something that I think everyone can feel like very upset viewing, blood and guts everywhere. I don't think that's something personal to individuals. I think this is pretty universal that people don't want to see that. But not every little thing of like, if somebody talks about an eating disorder, that means there should be a trigger warning. What's going to happen? They're going to hear about an eating disorder and that's going to make them start starving themselves again. That you can't control the outside world. And that's one of the things with recovery, whether it's from eating disorders, sexual abuse, drug abuse. You have to take care of yourself first and foremost. Tend to your own garden. Don't try to micromanage the world. I was going to say control, but it's actually micromanage everything around you. Okay, well, that's enough yammering and lecturing. So anyway, this can be a combination where the person has a very difficult time understanding themselves. And you may say that on a regular basis. I don't understand what I'm doing. I mean, you might not admit that to somebody else, but you might say it to yourself. Because, truth be told, there can be a lot of disjointed actions that take place where you are doing things that don't quite, that are very inconsistent with who you want to be. And that's what I would see as a sun sign. What your aspirations are. How you came here to shine your light. Your emotional nature may get in the way of that time and time again if you don't find a way to integrate this. Now, the problem is that Aquarius and Cancer form an awkward angle called an inconjunction, and that's when two planets are 150 degrees apart. For some of you, this will not be an official inconjunction. Maybe your sun and moon are 100 and, 60 degree, some kind of other degree span. Like 161 degrees apart, or 162, like 12 degrees apart or something like that, rather than between 0 and 10. I don't know, the exact degree span, but at the very least 0 to 5. So the point being that I don't think that it really matters if you have an inconjunction. I just wanted to let you know that this is more proof that this is a weird combination. And because of this, the emotional nature, which can guide your personal life quite a bit, is in a very domestic area, the 4th house of home and family. So you might be that odd Aquarian, and that is a little bit of an oxymoron. No, not an oxymoron, a redundancy. That you might be that odd Aquarian that loves to cook, that loves to entertain small groups. Like, you might be more homey than the typical Aquarian. Aquarius rules the 11th house, which is the house of the collective. And it's not uncommon for Aquarians to have all kinds of friends from different walks of life, and that you're very social. Not in a necessarily frivolous way. It can be in a quite stimulating way. And I think that a water sign is a people person too. I think, but that's the interesting thing. I think air and water are both people. I don't know what the plural is. And so that combination, you can still be with people, but you may prefer your inner circle to this big old world where you're always making new friends. I don't know, because the sun to me is the ultimate, so it may override the moon's tendencies. But emotionally, I mean, that's your comfort zone, is to have your little circle of people around you. It makes you feel safe and makes you feel at home. And another thing is, you can be the Aquarian who has children willingly, and maybe even at a young age. For some reason, I was thinking like of very premature. That just came into my mind. I'm trusting my intuition more and not analyzing everything to death. But I think that one of those reasons can be almost as an act of rebellion, because Aquarius, the Aquarian is a contrarian and does have a tendency to do the opposite of what everybody else around them is doing. So if everybody is, waiting until they're 30 years old to have kids, you might have a kid when you're 18 years old or something. And also, if you are raised by a very conservative family, you may feel this need to break away from that by doing the opposite as well. But I feel like even in those cases, you will tend to respect your family and be family-oriented more than the average Aquarian. Aquarians can be quite indifferent to the, I was going to say the emotional needs of others in general, not in a way that is very cold, like heartless, but because you may feel like, hey, you have to stand on your own 2 feet. You can't rely on somebody else to hold your hand all the time and give you companionship. In a marriage, for instance, the Aquarian tends to be quite independent, and your relationship may not resemble a lot of other people's. You may choose not to get legally married. You may choose not to maybe have children, or if you do have children, raise them in a very unusual way. I love, I'm not an Aquarian, but I have Venus in Aquarius, and I don't have kids, but I love these alternative child rearing methods. I always said if I had children, I would have raised them with one of these methods, like unschooling or some form of homeschooling that is not trying to indoctrinate children, but trying to get them to think for themselves, which I feel is the true purpose of education. So, if you come from a background where things were very traditional, you may still honor some of those traditions, because Cancer is an old-fashioned sign. So this could be a plot twist where you are kind of conservative. Some people may not realize this, but there are two rulers of Aquarius. One is Uranus, and that's kind of that wacky person waving their freak flag. The other ruler is Saturn, which is the ruler of Capricorn. So there's definitely this traditional streak, and there are. I'm American, so I can only cite American politicians who consider themselves conservative. Sarah Palin, I think she's a sun and moon in Aquarius. Dan Quayle, uh, uh, he's another one. And both of those, they were kind of controversial figures in their own way. They were lightning rods. I'm not going to go into why, but it's just very interesting how Aquarians tend to draw controversy to themselves. The opposite sign of Aquarius is Leo. Leo people draw attention to themselves very willingly, methodically. An Aquarian does so maybe inadvertently, just by being themselves, which can be kind of oddball sometimes. But you know what? It might just be that the normies are boring, right? You don't have to think of yourself as an oddball. Maybe you just are a true individual. But there are other people. Ronald Reagan was a Democrat, and he became a Republican, and he espoused more conservative ideals. So I could see this combination being maybe more traditional than the typical Aquarius. One of my observations about inconjunctions has been that despite what is said about the fact that they have nothing in common, I have been able to find common ground. I would say that for somebody who has this combination, that you may be interested in humanitarian issues. Aquarius rules that house, the collective, meaning that the person isn't just concerned with their own personal life, but they're concerned about the sake of humanity, society. Cancer is a nurturing sign. So Cancer people tend to gravitate towards situations where they can care for others. And it makes them feel like they are doing something that is good for the world, to take care of other people. I shouldn't say it like that. I mean, in tandem with the sun being in Aquarius, wanting to make the world a better place. But just in terms of the Cancer energy, it's just a natural, instinctual thing for a moon in Cancer person to care for others and be like actually concerned about other people's well-being. In terms of professions, I think that this combination would make a great social worker or somebody who is trying to reform a society, but in terms of social services, any kind of social services, and this could involve also working for the government, I suppose, in some capacity. Aquarius is an air sign. It's a very intelligent sign. Even the Aquarians who are not formally, don't have much formal education, will tend to come across as as highly intelligent. But they're also very intuitive. And so this combination can be great for healers of all varieties. For some reason, I always think of energy healers, talking about Reiki, where it's like the hands are charged with energy. And Aquarius, being ruled by Uranus, Uranus can be electricity. That's what I think I'm thinking of. And just anything that involves into the intuitive arts. If speaking of art, if you are a fine artist, I always like say, okay, what exactly is a fine artist? I think it's like a painter or something. I don't know if that includes. It's just whatever. But let's say you're a painter, you may do. I don't know how many people know who Teal Swan is, the modern spiritual teacher. She does it, and I think she makes these herself. She's not an Aquarius, but she makes these frequency paintings, and it's like capturing. I guess it's like you're supposed to look at the painting, and it like activates a certain thing, like abundance and maybe intuition. I don't know. It activates your energy, but it has kind of like a mandala or whatever, some kind of abstract design. And you might find that that's the kind of thing that you like to do. There's kind of this abstract quality with Aquarius. Aquarius is kind of like the sci-fi writer. If you're going to be a writer, I could totally see an Aquarius being a science fiction writer. And it wouldn't be much fiction. It might be like actual prophecy, that you were prophesizing what could occur. Definitely anything, maybe in academia. Cancer people, and I would say especially the moon, because that is very impressionable, can be history buffs. So that's another thing. If you were a writer, you might write about like not autobiographical, historical novels, or like I said, sci-fi, but just being a history teacher, a history professor, that might be something that you would excel in particular, in terms of what you teach. In terms of relationships, this can be where it gets a bit hairy, because you are of two minds. Your sun wants you to be free. You might even have that polyamorous side to yourself, where it's like, hey, I don't own anyone, I'm not possessive, I'm not jealous. And your moon is like clingy as F, very emotionally vulnerable. I should say too, mood-wise, this could be a crazy combination, because Aquarians are very ingenious people, but they also tend to be very, I would call it quirky. And if the moon is in Cancer, it's very changeable. And that can lead to instability in somebody's moods. And when you have unstable moods, even if it's not like just completely up and down, but if it's just all over the map, you may try to suppress that because you just don't want to associate with emotions, or you might blow hot and cold. And in relationships, I think anytime there is a sun in an air sign or a water sign, and then the moon is in a water or air sign, that combination of air and water can produce hot and cold tendencies. And so the other person may be like, was it something I said? Aquarius, I have said this about the moon in Aquarius, but I think it can even work with the sun in Aquarius, that you can just cut. No, I take that back. I don't know if you would do this. Normally, I think I said with the sun in Cancer, the moon in Aquarius, that you could just cut something off very abruptly. And the same would apply if your sun is in Scorpio and your moon is in Aquarius, that you could have this pretty cold side to you where if you're done with somebody, if they piss you off and they just finally cross that boundary with you, that you can just cut it off cold. What I think might be more likely to happen with this combination is that you stay with somebody longer than you should. So it might be the exact opposite, that you find it hard to give somebody up, because Aquarius is a fixed sign, so it tends to, people say that fixed signs like Aquarius or Leo or Scorpio or Taurus are very loyal. But the truth is, I think more than that, is that they don't like change. More than actually being loyal. I think that they are very adverse to change. But what's happening here is that you couple that with the moon in Cancer, which is super duper sentimental. You're probably the biggest cornball in a certain sense. Anyone with the moon in Cancer is like an easy touch for any kind of like a sappy movie where the violins start playing. You probably have waterworks going. And you're just like an easy mark for any kind of sappy movie or, songs. This is a completely random observation, but I'm going to say it. Maybe an Aquarius person would appreciate my randomness, but I find it hilarious sometimes because I grew up in the 70s. I was a kid in the 70s, and a lot of those songs, sometimes you get into kind of a mood to hear songs from your childhood. And there were so many sappy songs in the 70s going into the early 80s. And sometimes I just listen to that for fun, and I'll read the comments, and it is so hilarious how many guys are the ones who really act like, oh, wow, this is like an amazing song, and it's really a very sappy song and things like that. So it just shows that men have that side to themselves, but they can hide that. And the reason I guess I'm bringing this up, now that I think about it, is that Aquarius is a masculine sign and Cancer is a feminine sign. And so it's kind of like the King of Swords versus the Queen of Cups in the tarot. And so what can happen is that you have this, what's the term that they always use? That you're kind of like a pushover. Maybe some of you have kind of a cool exterior, but you are completely sappy inside. Totally sentimental, but there's another word. Now I was going to say like a big teddy bear, but that's not really what I mean. But I mean that you may, and also look at the rising sign to give an idea of how you present yourself to others. But I think ultimately the sun sign can take care of that. And sometimes, Aquarians a lot of times are very friendly but aloof. They're not necessarily just kind of warm and fuzzy and wanting to just chat it up with everybody. They have that reserve. I mean, they want to chat it up with people, but they have that emotional reserve. So they can be quite cool. But with the moon in Cancer, you can have that super duper sentimental side. So that's kind of funny thinking about it. I don't know how many people will agree with me. I just do these things off the top of my head, so I have no idea what I'm going to say. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. I'm glad that I found out that I hadn't done it. And if you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.